difficulties. Yes.
Right. Thank you, Mayor.
Charles is working on
The mayor is, or what is it? Have technical difficulties?
You know,
Live stream? Yeah. I'm not. I'm not. Mark, if you scoot over a little bit, you can be in the.
Oh, I needed my
I need-
fan.
You
Yeah,
need
I
your.
need a
Yeah,
sign
right.
like
There's
Tori.
Tori over there, and Randy's over here too. Oh, that was my head probably in that shot. Sorry about that at home.
Just lost some people.
yeah.
You were like, look at that long hair.
One
Yeah,
more minute,
you
guys.
get this, and then
I know. Right. Watch the views drop off.
Start on place week. Yeah, it won't even let me in.
Oh, your computer?
it takes forever.
Yeah.
It's a Windows-based operating system. That's the problem.
All right, it is 7:17. I'm going to call the Gardner City Council meeting back from recess. All right, let's move on with the agenda. Presentation item number 3. We're going to proclaim May 10th through the 16th of 2020 as Police Week in the city of Gardner, Kansas. We have Police Chief Jay Belcher sitting in our gallery here this evening. Thank you very much, Police Chief. Whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifices of their law enforcement agency, and that all members of the Gardner Police Department recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression. And whereas the members of the Gardner Police Department are long known for their faithful and loyal devotion and dedication to the preserving of peace and safety of every man, woman, and child living in our fine city. And whereas the police officers of Gardner, Kansas are engaged in a difficult and sometimes dangerous profession, which at times can lead to injury or even death, and I believe we had a fallen officer just a couple of days ago in Overland Park. And whereas the police officers of Gardner, Kansas unceasingly provide a vital public service to ensure that we do sleep peacefully at night. Now therefore it be resolved that I, Steve Shute, Mayor of the City of Gardner, Kansas, do hereby proclaim May 10th to the 16th, 2020 as Police Week in the city of Gardner, Kansas, and urge all citizens to reflect on the ways in which our lives have been touched by the peace officers who stand guard over our neighborhoods, and to participate in the tributes to the memory of those officers who have lost their lives in the line of duty. I'm going to hand this to Chief Belcher, and if you have any words to say, Chief, would love to hear them. Certainly.
Thank you, Mayor. We're very honored to have the support of the community and our governing body. We appreciate it very much. As you alluded to earlier, I think it's very important to acknowledge that our thoughts and prayers are with the Overland Park Police Department, as they lost an officer yesterday in the line of duty. Our little token of trying to help them out is we have 4 officers up there tonight in their city working district, answering calls, so their officers can get the grief counseling that they need. So we just wanted to give a shout out to our friends at Overland Park Police Department. We're thinking about them. And thank you very much for this proclamation.
Thank you, Chief. And our thoughts and prayers are with the family of the fallen officer in Overland Park, but also the families of those officers that served with that individual. Because it is difficult, you know. Police, the force, and obviously our city administrator is a former police chief for many years. Can also speak to this. It's a family atmosphere. You definitely are a brotherhood, a sisterhood in the line of duty. So we appreciate all those who serve our community and also the communities surrounding us. Presentation item number 4, Gardner Destination Downtown. Larry Powell's got some updates and some pretty exciting news from what I understand too.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight is a presentation, actually, that's the culmination of the second grant that we have picked up for the Gardner Main Street Corridor Plan. This is actually the beginning of the implementation phase based on tonight's findings by the Planning Commission as a recommendation passed on to you. If you adopt it as part of the comprehensive plan, the next steps would be for us to take these findings from the first and second plan and put them into the CIP and the CIE plan so that they can become long-term funding designated items. I'll do this presentation tonight actually in 3 small parts. I'll have a little bit of an intro for you. Then we do have a very short video that kind of recaps for the public and for you what was done in the first grant, so that you can have the background, so to speak, for that. And then Terry from Confluence will be here to make a final presentation on the items in the program itself. So based on that, what you see before you is an overview of the Gardner Main Street Corridor Plan. And in April of 2018, the governing body approved the comprehensive plan amendments to incorporate the Gardner Main Street Corridor Plan and Gardner Main Street Market Analysis. This Sustainable Places Plan was largely funded through a grant provided by the Planning Sustainable Places Program with the Mid-America Regional Council. And this plan provides specific policy guidance for the entire Main Street corridor, which, by the way, goes from 175th Street to our west city limits along US 56 Highway. And the second phase concentrated in the downtown area. Extending into adjacent neighborhoods and development areas, this visual shows the sub-areas for study from which the plan is based. The timeline for implementation will range from intermediate 1 to 5 years, medium 5 to 10, and long-term 10+ years for ongoing activities. And these general timelines are designed to coincide with the ranges for capital projects included in the future 5-year capital improvements plan and the 20-year capital improvements elements, which are reviewed annually. So at this time, we would like to bring up a short video for you if you'll watch the monitors, and we'll present that to the public.
1 second here. Hey guys, YouTube's back up, so I'm gonna turn this off. Go, see you later. Watch YouTube. All right, bye. There we go. I had like 40 people watching there, so I didn't want to turn it off while they were watching.
Thank you, sir.
Go for it.
So the Gardner Main Street Corridor Plan, which you can see focuses on the big picture and crafting a vision that integrates transportation, land use, and the environment while engaging the community in a collaborative dialogue. Since some of you were not involved in that process, I thought we could review the video created to introduce that plan to provide context for the Gardner Destination Plan. The Gardner Destination Downtown Plan is the second level of planning in the Planning Sustainable Places program and was also largely funded through that program. And it focused on project development and implementation activities for an 8-block area of the downtown, but including Cornerstone Park as shown on the slide. This plan ensures that implementation projects can move closer to readiness for preliminary engineering. The premise behind both projects is to build on the role of the corridor as a major vehicular transportation thoroughfare and facilitate its evolution to support multimodal transportation options and vibrant public spaces that are attractive for redevelopment and revitalization efforts. Public engagement activities begin with an all-day tour of civic spaces and market facilities in 6 locations around the KC metro area. Participants were able to speak to local officials and project champions about the challenges and opportunities they encountered in creating these spaces. And after the tour, participants gathered in a workshop to gather observations and discuss the potential vision for downtown Gardner. Following are some of the photos from that tour. These were the open market pavilion and public plaza activities that were downtown in Overland Park. And as you can see, there's the normal mixture. Many of you are familiar with the farmer's market. This is the upper left-hand corner. And the pavilion in the bottom left-hand corner is the entranceway off of the Main Street downtown area for that market. You might notice the unique bicycle parking implements that are in the bottom right-hand corner to help add to the atmosphere. This is the Linden Square in Gladstone, Missouri. It's a flexible gathering space with 2-sided performance pavilion and green space that serves as an ice rink in the wintertime. Integrated concession stand and ground level inspired new adjacent multifamily development is a part of that development. A traditional downtown refreshed landscapes include welcoming amenities that blend historic qualities with contemporary touches in downtown Liberty, Missouri. And their downtown is very much the same as ours, although it's a little bit larger in size, but it has much the same character and quality of life attributes. The Uptown Marketplace in Independence is also a farmer's market area, but has a bit of a unique, different venue. It's a multi-purpose enclosed market community building with open-air market structure. These doors all open and allow for pass-through or a combination of indoor and outdoor activities, or in winter weather or bad weather, they can be closed down and allow the activity to continue inside, whereas the farmer's market open pavilion, as you can see, the bottom one, is a little bit more exposed to the elements. An example of another traditional downtown with lovely amenities is downtown Lee Summit in Missouri. And these are just some of the items that are accessories for the downtown. You have wayfinding signage, you have a bit of arts and crafts type displays, you have plantings, of course, and then you have some decorative venues around the bottoms of trees and so forth, rather than just a brick. They have a decorative screening and some bicycle hookups again for the people to safely secure their bicycles. And a much-loved public space was created by a private developer in Leawood, and this passive green space also converts to an ice skating rink in the wintertime. The public then was engaged. We engaged the public here locally with the last food truck event in last summer at the farmers market here in the downtown, Gardner's Farmer Market. And we did online surveys with residents. They were also engaged. And the survey had 500 responses representing 2.5% of Gardner's population. That's the highest ranked amenities with major support for the downtown were a farmer's market, additional walking paths, interactive water feature, food trucks, and a better amphitheater. Less desired types of open space for downtown were those related to active recreation, perhaps because this space wasn't as envisioned as suitable for those purposes. We held 2 public workshops, open house meetings also, and the steering committee from the Gardner Main Street Corridor Plan stayed on and led this plan, providing continuity through the process. And those were, I can't name them all here because there were over 20 people involved in the steering committee there, and our thanks go to them because they stayed with us through thick and thin and over a very long period of time to help substantiate that process. And I know that many of you as council members attended that process also off and on through the 18 months or so that this took. Additionally, new project champions were involved as part of the implementation committee, and that offered input during a workshop. And as part of the workshop, participants provided input on 3 potential visions of civic space enhancement. And Terry will be talking to you more about those. Property owners were contacted, and potentially impacted property owners were consulted at multiple stages of the planning process, along with citizens committees to ensure that the various elements of the plan were welcome and achievable. And that includes the churches, the library, and the fair board. They were included at all times in this process. We finally ended up doing what we called a walk and roll, and this was basically a method to see how easily accessible our downtown was to people with disabilities of various types. We have a number of people that live in our community that have various disabilities. Everything from I don't want to use the word normal, but people that are using wheelchairs for transportation, people that are on crutches, people that are blind, people that are deaf. We have all of these people in our community, and they, of course, use our downtown. And some of our amenities that we lack for assisting to those people would be part of a long-term plan to help improve the lifestyle and the quality of life and the accessibility of our downtown for those individuals. So during that rock and roll, members of the committee or staff featured the project area, and you were given an opportunity, if you had never been in a wheelchair yourself, to sit in a wheelchair and see how easy or hard it was to get around in our community. The consulting team of both these projects was led by Kansas City-based planning and landscape architectural firm Confluence, assisted by Collins, Notris and Associates, and they specialize in planning, economic development, and governmental affairs, and Wilson and Company specializing in transportation and engineering. These were planning transportation grant funds from Mark, and so a great part of everything that we did centered around the transportation aspects. So busing, a place for people to get into and off to, public transportation, bike paths, walking paths, alternate forms of transportation besides just using your car yourself and getting in and out of town, and finding that closest parking spot to the business that you wanted to particularly get into. So the project consultants will now present the Gardner Downtown Destination Plan to you.
Good evening, everybody. Terry Burke-Bigler, a principal with Confluence. Good to be back in front of you all. We've only been waiting to do this since March, I think. So glad to be here. Larry asked, do you want to do this in person? Do you want to do this remote? I said, no, let's do this in person. I think it'll be a better dialogue that way. You know, we're excited to be able to put a bow on this project and then position you all to begin to move forward with implementation. Obviously, things are different than they were when you started this process 4 or 5 years ago. Things are different than they were 3 months ago. We don't know what that outcome is going to be yet, and just watching that video, I believe that was completed in 2017 is about when we did that. And quite frankly, some of the numbers in that probably aren't valid today, coming out of, you know, what we're going to be, you know, later this year. You know, the retail sector is certainly going to be changing. Don't know what that looks like yet. But I think the benefit, as I was kind of reflecting on this, of this project, this downtown destination, and focus on this, is I believe these are the places that are still going to be desired and strong, and you know, places where people want to be. You know, they're going to be still, I think, looking for that rich experience as well as opportunities to, you know, to shop, to dine out, and then just to engage with their neighbors and their friends. And that's really what this project was about. As Larry said, these funds were, you know, dedicated toward projects that were transportation oriented in some fashion. And as we go through this, you'll see we talk about things that you might not think are transportation related, but really they tie in because part of this is looking at how you can maybe add density along transportation corridors to encourage people to walk, bike, maybe use modes of transportation other than cars, maybe enhance the need for mobility hub. That's one of the things we'll talk about here, and how can we bring more people down to live here, but also to spend time and money in downtown, and then that be supported by alternative transportation opportunities. So even though not everything is necessarily transportation centric, it all certainly has a place and a tie to supporting alternative transportation. The project really focuses on two areas: streetscape design and then creation of public green spaces. Coming out of the original Main Street corridor plan, one of the key things we heard and one of the key goals coming out of that was to create a heart. The community just felt like there wasn't a heart in Gardner's downtown. Not that they didn't have pride in it, but there really wasn't this place to gather in downtown that they've seen in other communities and that folks felt could be here. The fairgrounds are there, but it's a couple weeks out of the year. You close the streets off for special events, and those are temporary, but is there a place where we could do that on a more permanent basis? So creating that heart. So that'll be talked about when I get to the part of this that talks about green spaces. I'm going to start with talking about the streetscape. As Larry mentioned, it's an 8-block area, basically spanning from Center Street on the west to Sycamore on the east, Washington to the north, as well as we started really digging into this, we pulled Cornerstone Park into this, and then Warren Street on the south. And the streetscape, when we initially look at this, it's broken down into 3 categories. You've got primary street treatments, secondary, and tertiary. Primary street treatments are essentially those areas that are more priority, more focused investment. Basically, you'll do more. You would invest more in those corridors potentially. Maybe they've got a higher traffic. That's, in this case, Main Street obviously is where the core of your businesses are. So we see that as a primary area. It's also a little bit unique because even though Elm is a primary area, we see those being treated differently. Obviously, one is a KDOT right-of-way with much more traffic, and Elm is not. So they're both primary, but they'll have a different treatment. And then as you move away from that core, that's when you start to look at that secondary, tertiary treatments, and we start to step down in the types of improvements we would be making. So example of a primary street, Main Street. The typical proposed section here, you can see we're essentially working within existing right-of-way. Larry mentioned the walk and roll. A priority goal for this project was to improve pedestrian space and pedestrian accommodations for all, universally accessible. In older historic places, that can be a challenge. Not only does it take creativity, it takes investment. This concept looks at essentially replacing sidewalks entirely so that we can try to address some of those non-accessible entries to the shops along Main Street. But that also requires some change and repavement and releveling of Main Street. So in order to fully achieve that, if the city were to do that, we're actually suggesting it would take a complete street replacement, because you really need to look at the elevation, the vertical elevation of that street in order to accommodate some of that, if the ultimate goal is to make every storefront accessible. That's what the plan proposes. Obviously, you can back off of that to any extent necessary based on budget and available funding. But you can see here, one of the things we heard was, and we know we've been on the corridor a lot, you've got wide street, a wide roadway, you've got a lot of traffic, you've got large trucks. It doesn't feel comfortable as a pedestrian. Quite frankly, even on the sidewalk, it doesn't necessarily feel comfortable because of the noise of the trucks going by. All the way back to your comprehensive plan back in 2014, I believe, there was the concept of a median introduced on Main Street. That was carried forward through the last planning effort and carried forward into this. In discussions with KDOT along the way, they have never said no. They have said they wouldn't necessarily make a formal recommendation until they see a real project come across their desk that they can do a real review. Our sense, and this is part of where Wilson came in handy, is they're translating with KDOT and working that. It's an acceptable solution. One of the concerns they have would be anything vertical in that median. So in this latest plan, you'll see we're not showing trees going down the center like in earlier versions. And that was coming out of actually some relatively new guidelines from KDOT about elimination of any kind of vertical elements in medians. So we think the median is still a viable option, and we're able to accommodate that without narrowing sidewalks on the edge. We're able to accommodate that with the parking spaces. Right now, your parking spaces are about 12 feet wide on either side of the street, which is extremely wide, and we get that. We can take up some of that space, still have 10 feet wide parking spaces, which is great for parallel parking. Introduce the median, and then also expand sidewalks in certain areas. We can narrow those lanes down to 11 feet and still accommodate the throughput that KDOT's going to be looking for. And the idea behind that, some folks were concerned, well, is that too narrow? Is it going to be safe? Studies have shown that when you visually narrow a corridor, you inherently slow the traffic. And you don't necessarily have to put, people say, well, can't we just post it as a 25 mile an hour speed limit or whatever? It's a Band-Aid. People drive what the road feels like. And unfortunately, things like stop signals even don't necessarily help because they're rushing to get to the next one or get through the next one. So those can even be a detriment. So the goal is to narrow the road to the greatest extent we can so that people naturally see something is different here and I need to slow down. So that's intentional, but still perfectly safe for emergency vehicles, the large trucks that need to go through, things like that. Elm Street, another primary street. I'll try to move along here so we don't take all night. Introducing more landscape, streetscape, street lighting along that corridor. We're able to grab a little bit of space back from some of the parallel parking that's there now is relatively wide. We can take a little bit of that and put it back into sidewalk. You'll notice here on the left side, we've got wider sidewalks, and this is looking north, by the way, from Maine looking north. So we've got wider sidewalks on the west side or left side. We're not able to necessarily introduce space for trees on the right side or on the east side, which is fine. We don't necessarily have to have them everywhere, but we're trying to introduce those where we can. Introducing bulb outs at intersections where we can add landscaping and things like that. And then you can see there in the foreground, Elm would also then become a shared bike facility as well. Shawnee Street, so a secondary street. So this is north of City Hall, so just behind City Hall here, looking toward the east. And so you can see, and we'll get into this a little bit, the Gardner, this yellow roof structure, a market structure that is proposed behind City Hall. In this case, the idea would be that road table would be introduced where the pedestrians cross from the market over to the new green space to the north. So that, again, prioritizing pedestrian movements over cars. And then you can see the parking, the street trees, and pedestrian lighting that's proposed along Shawnee. So in this case, Shawnee is secondary. About the only thing that would really change is primary streets, we're introducing more of a brick accent. Secondary streets, we're probably not doing that. But we think in Shawnee, in this area, it makes sense to have street trees and pedestrian lighting. Tertiary street, Sycamore, you got a blend of commercial and residential over there. Essentially what we would be proposing is making sure that we've got adequate 5-foot sidewalk widths on both sides. Where we can, introducing a turf strip between back of curb and sidewalk to allow for some street trees. Don't really think it's necessary to take the period street lighting fixtures out that far. But at least introduce some street trees and a little bit of buffer there from the street to the sidewalks for pedestrians. So once we start getting into the design of the streetscape, and again, this doesn't give you the final design of a streetscape. It's intended to show you the proposed kit of parts, as we call it, and the elements that would be introduced. But we haven't said where every bench goes or where every bike rack goes or every litter receptacle throughout downtown. Much like engineering, that would come later. But you can see here, the idea is if we're going to put trees in, let's give them a large enough planter to thrive, as well as some base plantings and room for that. You'll still have this, standard, street lighting that you have, but there's opportunities to, introduce banners on those. Pedestrian lighting, maybe something similar to what's out there, but maybe something newer. Making sure we're being as efficient as we can be. You'll see in a rendering that we've got here in a minute this idea of a gateway marker at Elm and Main to identify that as the important intersection in downtown. I mean, I think everybody realizes that today because of the activity that happens around there, but visually, if you're driving through, you may not necessarily get that yet. Wayfinding signage, that could be incorporated just to tell folks where the different amenities are when they're out strolling around downtown, and then obviously litter receptacles, seating, and bike racks. So we had a couple of concepts early on that we asked the couple to weigh in on about what they felt was an appropriate design approach or motif for the area, and they chose this square design aesthetic approach. And what it shows is some brick accents at the corners. So this would be, as it says there, Main and Elm, looking to the northwest. So you're sort of hovering above Ground House, looking northwest towards City Hall. So you can see there crosswalks. You can see the median on both sides. The bulb outs that you've got some there already, but we're enhancing those visually with some additional accent paving, and then introducing more landscaping. And you can see the vertical monument that occurs on those two corners. The idea there of the placement is we want those to be visible to folks that are driving through, so we want them to be on that right side. So as you're driving through, that's in your visual frame, as opposed to we don't necessarily need one at every corner. We think they're most valuable to the drivers coming in because those help to sort of identify that there's more going on here, as well as just the narrowness of the street. And then you can see down at ground level what those can begin to look like, and those become placemaking elements. Those could have some sort of storytelling opportunities on them. They could just be designed with some city logo. All of that is yet to be determined, but this notion of incorporating brick, because that's a predominant element of the architecture of the area, but we think you can introduce some limestone as an indigenous material to the Kansas landscape as well. But very straightforward, nothing really too flashy. We think brick is a good thing to use for an accent, but we don't think it's appropriate to use it everywhere. We like to spend our money on vertical elements that are more visible, but there is some benefit to having some accenting there to tie everything together. Mobility hub. So part of this was to identify a mobility hub. What's a mobility hub? It's a place where multiple modes of transportation can be served. So think of bus, think of, this is potentially a place for, if scooters come to downtown Gardner, there could be parking hubs here. This could be a place for hailed driving services, Uber, things like that. Drop me off at the bus stop, I'll grab my bus, I'll go into town, and then I'll pick up the car, the Uber, and head back home from there. It's not intended to be a large park and ride, but there are spaces here where folks could park. One of the things we learned from the ATA Ride KC during this is that they're ending, and I don't know if it's occurred yet, but this route will no longer go south from here. So they'll have shuttle service from here south because of the ridership level being so low. So this is now a good opportunity or a good place for a turnaround. It's kind of the terminus of the line for them moving forward. So we had them weigh in on what might be a good location. We looked at a location north of City Hall up on Shawnee. Just kind of competed with some of the other goals we had for that area, and then they just didn't feel like it really worked as well for them. They think this location at the corner of Park and Center works pretty well for them because if you can see, if you follow those arrows, they can come in from the east, loop down on Sycamore, pick up over at the mobility hub, and then just go up and loop back on Center. So it keeps them off Elm. They've just got the one movement on Sycamore that way, and they felt like this is a pretty good location for that. Obviously, it takes some partnership with the folks that own that property, but a lot of this can be accommodated within right-of-way. This doesn't have to be some large grandiose thing, but a nice shelter. There's an opportunity there to brand a shelter, to make it Gardner's. And then you can just see the other elements, whether it's bike storage, or like I said, some scooter docking stations, available parking, things like that. Now, moving into the downtown master plan, just to kind of orient everybody, you can see City Hall there in the center, and then south, essentially what we've shown there, coming out of the Main Street corridor plan, we had identified a small green space on the south side, just across the street here. And digging into this further, we just kind of backed away from that, thinking that wasn't really probably necessary, and that we should take the advantage of that frontage on Main Street for commercial space to the greatest extent possible. That seemed to be a more appropriate use for that space. It's going to be a market-driven thing. Basically, all we're showing is a box of some sort of mixed-use infill that could occur in that location. Obviously, the city doesn't own that property, but that would take some partnership with the property owners to work that out, as well as work out the parking needs. But being in the downtown area, the parking requirements don't necessarily apply as they would out in the area out by the highway, but you need to have enough parking for people. We're still a car-centric community. So, the tenants in there are still going to want a certain amount of parking. You can see the mobility hub down there at the southwest corner again. And then I'm just going to give you the quick high-level view, and then I'll dig into this plan a little more. Along center, west of City Hall, we're showing this residential / mixed-use infill opportunity. Public market I mentioned, just behind City Hall to the north. And then you get up into the new green space that's between the church and Blazers. And I'll talk a little bit about how we landed where we are there. And then moving up into Cornerstone, there was a discussion about potentially rethinking the design of Cornerstone Park and then this multi-purpose community building idea. And oh, this is out of order. So the green space design strategy. So along Main Street, this is looking northeast. If you're hovering above kind of the intersection of Center and Main, looking northeast over City Hall toward the school. So item A, you can see off to the right there, that's just a view of this farmer's market. So similar to what they have in Overland Park, or what they built just a couple years ago in Independence, where during the day it's parking for City Hall, for the library, during a weekday. But when the farmer's market is open, then farmers back in there, shoppers walk down the center, just like they do in Overland Park. This seemed like it was the preferred place by the community, by the steering committee, and it seemed to make a lot of sense because of a couple of factors. One issue that was discussed throughout is this certainly will require a relocation and partnership of the group home that's behind City Hall. Nobody's overlooking that. Staff reached out to those folks a couple of times, but that's something that'll have to be part of this. The idea is that this is a vision. If there's enough energy behind it, then those things can begin to happen. So we realized that would have to occur. But this allows us to maintain the same amount of parking that we have back there today. We're not losing parking. We're just shifting it a little bit farther to the west to make room for the market. And then I'll get closer up on this. And then we're providing some nice plaza space near the library. And they were interested in that notion of partnership and providing more place for them to kind of enhance their outdoor programming opportunities. You can see these two here in the foreground. There's a small plaza space just on the west end of City Hall by this new mixed-use kind of tan box. We've got one of those on each side, understanding that there's a study being done or has been completed on City Hall about some future upgrades and access improvements that might occur. The discussion was that at that time it might also be appropriate to consider converting these drive spaces, or what's drives now, into pedestrian space. The vertical monument note just to the east of City Hall, there's this opportunity for a large vertical element that we think can really be a beacon to attract people into this new space, because you otherwise really can't see this park space back here from Main Street. So this vertical element, whatever it might be, could be architectural, could be a really cool sculpture, just something to catch the eye that makes folks slow down and just take a peek in and catch a glimpse of what's back there. Something to pique their interest to get them to want to come around the block. Similar here on the west side of City Hall is some, pedestrian opportunity, whether that's seating area for city staff or, maybe less paving, more landscape, just something like that. And then in the foreground, there was discussion about a higher and better use for that hard corner at Center and Main than the old bank building that's there now. So looking at some sort of 2-story mixed-use office infill opportunity at some point in the future. And then moving back to the north from that is essentially a residential, multi-tenant apartment building type product there.
Can I ask a question real
Sure,
quick?
absolutely.
So on that previous picture,
Yes.
so the mixed-use infill and residential infill, I like those ideas. What I don't see on either one of those two is any place for anybody to park.
So the mixed-use residential, or the mixed-use infill, sorry, parking would be, whether it's on-street parking on Center or Main, and then part of this would take some discussion with city staff about what is the amount of parking they want them to improve or include downtown. Some of that could be partnered with the residential infill is proposing, and this is just us, we don't have a developer proposing
I
this,
understand.
would have some stacked parking on the first level.
Okay.
So the concept there is that it may be a podium type construction where you've got parking on the first level, units built above that. Perhaps there's some capacity built into that parking structure for helping to offset the mixed use. So that's one of the themes about this is a lot of this is market driven. So it is certainly
Yeah,
big
no,
picture.
I understand. I just would, that's the one thing that
Yeah.
corner is already busy with the businesses there with parking. So
Right.
I'm just thinking if we put more, it's,
No, it's certainly a consideration that has to be taken into account.
thank you.
Yep.
Was there thought on that mixed use just west of City Hall, where the outdoor area, as to the height of City Hall and that mixed use infill, where those sitting areas, how much sunlight will be available there throughout the day?
We didn't do a detailed shade study, no. But, I think the amount of shade and sun you'll have in there, that's why what we're showing is there may be umbrella provided seating. I think it's going to be a sunny area. You're not going to have a lot of shade coming off City Hall. Late in the day, you probably will get some shade off of this 2-story building or whatever might be built there. But yeah, certainly whatever's designed there, you've got to take that into account. It's, there could be trees, there could be more trees. This is right now just a vision. So I think but those are the types of things that need to be considered. This is just the other end of City Hall, so you can see a similar approach, just trying to create that space. And again, I said maybe more paving, less landscape. I think the more we look at this, the more we think the concept is there, but certainly design needs to occur and balance that because you've got a lot of paving. So we think there's probably room for more landscape and or trees, shade to come into this. So this view starts to set up this kind of spine, if you will, connector. So originally we had a couple different concepts we asked folks to weigh in on. One of them was this with this diagonal connector that you see that kind of points you up toward Cornerstone Park. And then another one was this axial concept that basically creates this north-south axis coming right out of City Hall through the market and then directly north through that green space. And we think they both had merit. So that's why you're seeing a merger of the two concepts here. This angular concept really does a good job of tying Main Street into that space fairly directly. So people can naturally now flow from Main Street through this pedestrian plaza into, this area by the library, up to the market, or if they want to go even farther up into the green space, if there's a performance or something like that going on, it's a very direct connection for those people. Likewise, if folks are coming out of City Hall or just attending the farmer's market, It's an easy access north and south, visually very strong as well as physically, a good direct link. We think that could be a really strong view looking out of the lobby here of City Hall to the north. Another thing I'll show, this view B, the close-up over here on the right shows the introduction of a handicap parking space on Main Street, because to do what we're showing in this concept removes a couple of spaces that are currently located right at the kind of northeast corner of City Hall. So this actually puts a real ADA compliant accessible parking space at the front of City Hall, right where that current accessible route begins as you go to ramp up to City Hall. What this doesn't show, there's still a curb, well, actually the ramp is just behind that little white car there. But this allows somebody to park, actually exit on the passenger side of the car, and then wheel up into the space. There are some additional parking spaces that are provided, ADA spaces, in the lot back by the library as well, so that they can still move through similar to what they did before. Another view of that space, you can begin to see the garden space that's created. I think that's a real neat opportunity for the library to, whether that becomes a learning garden, whether it's a rain garden that begins to treat some of the runoff in the area, certainly an educational opportunity there, pollinators, just different things that can be done with that space from an educational and outreach standpoint, as well as providing some shade for people that just want to take a break, whether it's city employees or people downtown, or whether it's folks from the farmer's market, maybe grabbing something at a food truck coming over here to sit and eat.
Can I ask another question? I'm sorry.
Yep. No.
On that picture there, how many parking spaces do you know just do we lose in the City Hall parking lot and in the library parking lot there?
So we haven't lost any. They're shifted west.
Okay. Oh, so that's that.
Beyond the farmer's market, you can
Farmers
kind of see
market
the
building
glimpse.
kind of goes into the property.
Yeah, so the farmer's market essentially is sitting pretty close to where the group home property is
Okay.
today, which isn't
Okay.
parking. And then that green space is where there's some parking today. So there's still parking under the shed,
Okay. Yeah. Right.
as well as parking to the west.
I guess
Yeah.
I didn't realize that building moved that far
Yeah.
west.
Yeah.
So.
And that, you're not the first person to ask, because that's the assumption, is we're losing a lot of and we're repositioning the parking back there.
As long as we're staying.
And really,
visual
that's been the goal and the discussion all along, is throughout the downtown area. We're not losing any parking. We're adding a couple potentially. Final design may net that out, but that's been a priority goal as well. Is we're not losing any parking with any of these improvements downtown.
Okay.
And again, you've got the additional parking that's being discussed for the residential. Okay, so here's a view in the foreground. I want to touch on this multi-purpose community building concept. So Larry showed you this Uptown project in downtown Independence, Uptown Market. Pretty neat idea. So they have two shed structures adjacent to each other, but one of them, as you saw, has the garage doors. So it's very flexible. That idea caught a lot of traction during this discussion, and folks felt like there was a place for something like that. And that's something we heard, several years ago when we started on this, was just a need for more rentable space in Gardner. And to have something like that in downtown would be great. What's going on over at Warren Place is a good start, but somewhat limited in the types of events they might hold. So this would be that sort of free span structure, garage doors that could open, and it just seemed like a good fit for the park, a good addition to the park. Wouldn't necessarily be the farmer's market. Could be something that the fair could use in partnership when that's going on, as well as just, kind of rethinking how the park is designed, creating this park lawn space where people can hang out. You can expand activities from the fair or other events that might yet to be programmed in downtown Gardner. But the idea is that it could be an indoor venue, rentable. If it's a nice day, you can open up a door or two. People can spill out onto the lawn. You can spill out onto the patio. So there's some real flexibility there and some revenue generation as well. And then you can see, looking back to the south or up, in this image. You can kind of see the other end of that diagonal walkway that connects you back to Main Street. And I'm going to touch on here, let me see. Yeah, I think this is a good one. So just west of that angled walkway where D is pointing. So you're walking, you know, in this image to the right, you're walking southeast toward City Hall, toward Main Street. Well, you see the large kind of untouched green lawn space just to the west of that. So it'd be south of Washington Street. So that's the church property. So they've been involved in at the table from the beginning. And, you know, we got to the point, you know, they were sort of on board with these discussions about doing something on that property. And you know, we know they own it, and we know that it can be time consuming to you know, try to change hands on that property. And they've got a lot invested, you know, sweat as well as dollars in acquiring that property. Ultimately, where we landed was they kind of gave us a directive: if you can keep to the west of the power poles that are out in that lawn, which is essentially where that north-south sidewalk landed, is just to the west of those, they would be more comfortable with us showing something over there. So that's why this kind of landed. It worked out well because most of the development was over there anyway. We were intentionally trying to allow their green space to be totally flexible for their vacation Bible school and all of that they use it for. So that's kind of why you see that sort of straight, hard edge where nothing happens east of there, which is fine. We think that's a good compromise. It'll all take a lot of continued discussion to realize this, but I wanted to make sure that kind of everybody's aware of how that conversation went and where it landed. So you see the amphitheater lawn space, and I'll zoom in on that in a little bit, in that space. And then looking at a, you know, kind of an upgraded playground, water feature, some sort of splashy place that kids can play in the park. But really kind of taking the amphitheater component and putting it in that center space and turning Cornerstone into this kind of multi-purpose building, and then just, you know, accenting the aquatic facility there. So this is a view looking back at that amphitheater lawn. I don't remember off the top of my head what the capacity is, but it's several hundred people that you could fit in that lawn for an event. You know, the band shell, depending upon how you wanted to move forward, could be bigger, smaller. You know, this may or may not be where the Festival on the Trails concert happens. That's yet to be determined. But there's certainly the capacity for a large crowd to do something in this space. Ultimately, the final program will drive the final design. We're showing things like garden, more lush landscaping around the edges. Somebody could come in and say, this is great, but I need to be able to fit in twice as many people. Okay, well, we look at what you do to create more lawn space and less landscape. It's still very flexible. And then that view on the right, you can just kind of see a close-up. You know, we're trying to provide spaces that are flexible and not over-programmed, over-designed. So that little triangular space could be a place where tents are set up during events, festivals. That could be a place where you just have some picnic tables and chairs. So it's just flexible, easy space to use. Those structures in the background there could be rentable spaces. Family reunions, groups could have corporate events in those, and then just spill out into that triangular space, or into the lawn space if they wanted to kind of partner on the whole property. The residential development there on the edge, you can see, you know, the concept being if you had parking underneath, you build some stick structure above that. Some of those first floor units might actually have patio, which is the roof deck of the garage. Ultimately, that's going to be a developer decision. We just put it in there because we think it fits and it helps address the parking issue. More than likely, a developer is going to want to see more units. You know, this is guesstimated around the mid-40s. They're probably going to want to push it to 60, which essentially is another level. Maybe that's okay. We just wanted to be somewhere in the middle for this vision, just to kind of give you that bit of leverage if you felt like it was getting too dense or too big. You know, but you have that freedom, and checked, I believe Kelly and her team, I'd have to confirm, but it's my understanding that another level could occur and it would still fit within the regs. And then I'm wrapping up here. So another view of the playground, you can kind of see that water feature and redesigned playground, some additional pavilions for rental. And then you can see that multi-purpose building if the doors are up and how that can engage that lawn space. Okay, so last couple slides. Implementation. So we've broken it down into projects. Not that any one project has to go first, second, or third, and not that you couldn't do sub-parts of these, but just so that we could kind of communicate this to everyone involved in the way that made sense. We've identified 3 potential project areas for the green space, or the downtown green space. So project 1 could be a redesign of Cornerstone Park and all the parts that go in that. As it shows there, you could do the multi-purpose building, phase 1, phase 2 could be other improvements, or you could flip that. These are all interchangeable. We're not putting a timeline to which ones or a prioritization of which ones need to go first. Civic Green is that center space. Got to acquire the property, or at least come to some sort of MOU of how it's going to be used, lease agreement, something like that, and then park construction. We think it's quite possible that a developer could come in and say, I would love to do this residential / mixed use something, but when can you do this green space? So that could be a trigger point that says city needs to get serious about, do they want to do that? How does that look? Again, a lot of this is going to be market driven, so we're not trying to get too caught in what has to happen first. City Hall Plaza, so Cornerstone Park, you own it. So from an ownership standpoint, that's your easiest one. City Hall Plaza, you don't own it, but you've got at least one willing partner in the library, the county. The group home, there's a solution for that could be solved. It takes a little creativity, but there is a solution that I think could meet both their needs as well as the communities, and gives them a good facility. The green space in the middle, if I crystal balled it, to me that probably waits or relies on a developer doing something, but who knows. Streetscape, again, we broke it down into 9 blocks or 9 project parts. Main Street and Elm Street seem to be the first ones, if you're going to invest, that make the most sense. Main Street likely to be the most expensive, but also probably the biggest impact and the biggest statement to your community. Properties like this, when we had economic planning solutions involved in the prior phase, one of the things they said is people that bring a business here, they're not just looking at rooftops, they're looking for experiential space. They're looking for a place that they fit and that has a higher purpose. That's what this space can be. But they also look for what's the city doing to invest in that property, and is my investment going to be protected? So I think Main Street makes a lot of sense. Elm, so much room for improvement. And a big statement could be made there, and that could become a great pedestrian business corridor. The others, I think it kind of depends on other projects that might come forward. If you did something along Washington, if you rethought Cornerstone Park, obviously if a developer comes in and does something along Center, Shawnee, those start to fall into place based on what's happening around there. Sycamore is a relatively, low-hanging fruit. Could be something done there fairly easily. Just kind of depends on when you feel like it's appropriate to spend some money. The last slide, it just touches on a few funding sources that we identified in the plan. Not that these are all of them, but at least it starts to give staff a toolbox to work with. The one thing I'll say, kind of, and again, sort of where I started, coming out of, the pandemic, we don't know what yet, but we know infrastructure is a big topic of discussion in DC. In our business, that's what we watch when these things occur. We think it's likely that there will be something in phase 4 or whichever phase they're in now. That's what we're hearing a lot of. KDOT, or state of Kansas, has a plan for, I want to say, approximately a $9 billion infrastructure package already on the desk of the governor. Don't know the status of that, don't know if it will go through or not, for highways and for transportation. So I think the theme in our mind is shovel-ready is probably gonna be a buzzword again when that stimulus package hits, as it was with the ARA funding that came through back in 08, 9, or 10. So that's, that's where I would be hedging. That's where I would be looking to be prepared to leverage for some additional investment. That's what we're suggesting to some of our clients is how close are you to having something shovel ready? We expect that may be part of that. Will it? I don't know for sure, but I think it's a pretty decent bet. Other questions? That's all I have.
Anything from the group?
Got a lot of good hard work. Appreciate you guys.
Very
Oh, we love it. We've enjoyed working with the community. It's been you guys are a great community to work with. 2% of participation in that survey that Larry mentioned earlier, that blew us away the first time we saw that. I mean, that doesn't sound like a lot to you maybe. That's a huge return. 500 people is a huge return of responses. So you have a very eager and active community. They want to be engaged. And, the future's bright. So appreciate your time. We really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it.
I've got one question.
Yeah.
So downtown where you've got the accents being brick, that looks great, but where you have the sidewalk and then it transitions to brick and then down into the roadway, is that brick going to be a concern ongoing for mobility as the brick settles, it gets up and down, freezing, issues with it not being a solid surface?
So let's see if I can find an example, like where it's an accent behind curb.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying? No, and that would be, and actually, the benefit of that is it's a small enough area you don't have as big of an issue there as if you're paving the entire sidewalk with that. That's where you see the bigger differential settling issues because all it takes is one area to fail and it can start to undermine beyond that. So this, in our opinion and our experience, has been a better approach from a durability standpoint.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, and we really appreciate your team's work on this. It's been a long, hard road. A lot of people having a lot of opinions, but you've really come up with something that kind of threads the needle.
Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate it very much. Thank you all. Have a good night.
I think there'll be a whole lot of folks in this community that love that multi-purpose building over by Cornerstone Park.
So they pay for it instead of just love it.
Well, that's the whole point, isn't it? I gotta find the money, guys.
Yeah, right.
That's the next step. All right, we'll move on to presentation item number 5. This is our budget request for 2021-2022. Matt Wolf, Finance Director, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. This presentation is to go over the 2021 and 2022 budget requests from the Chamber of Commerce in the Southwest Johnson County EDC. Remember earlier this year, Council approved funding for 2020 for the Chamber of Commerce at the level of $40,000 and $90,000 for the EDC. And if you recall at that meeting, staff had some concerns about transit guest tax revenues trending well below projections. And we've continued to monitor those. They continue to come under expectations. And keep in mind, basically transit guest tax revenues also kind of lag behind. Like what we receive in March is probably for receipts that happened a couple months before that. So we're well behind in our projections, and it's not been taking COVID-19 into account at all. So we expect to not receive much revenue for the rest of the year. Staff has been communicating that with both entities, and that's probably helped frame their budget requests going forward. So for 2021 and 2022, the Chamber has asked for steady funding at $40,000 for both years. There's nothing, and that's just for their core services. They're not asking for anything for the CVB at this point. And the EDC is following a similar approach where they're asking for continued funding at $90,000 each year. We've worked that into our projections to see pretty much the health of the Economic Development Fund, and we believe we can accommodate those requests. So we want to bring those requests to Council's attention, and we have Jason and Greg both on the line if you have any questions or comments.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matt. Anybody have questions from the dais for Matt?
So basically, we're just foregoing the CVB fund at this point.
At this time, and We can always review this, like 2022 is not set in stone, we can go back next year and review it if revenues look better.
Well, and I think it's important that we continue as much as we can to support them, because I'm sure they're struggling as well with membership and everything going on right now. But I think they're important pieces in rebuilding everything as we come out of it too. So I think we need to keep that support.
I think there's gonna be a lot of opportunities presented that those guys will be on the forefront of from the other cities we're not gonna see.
Well, I think from the standpoint of budgetary performance and notwithstanding the transient guest tax, which I know is going to take a significant hit, particularly in the next quarter because of COVID. But from the standpoint of sales tax revenue and property tax revenue, we are pretty steady. We're not seeing the kind of devastation that other communities are seeing. So that is going to put us in a better financial spot, I think, coming out of this than a lot of communities in our area.
We haven't seen any data on that yet, just because, just like you mentioned, it lags behind. We're probably not going to know the impact on our sales tax until probably June.
Sure.
But you're correct, where we expect the city sales tax to be somewhat insulated. A lot of it comes from Price Chopper and Walmart. We do have quite a bit of our revenue comes from county sales tax, which will probably be hit quite a bit harder.
Yeah, that's going to be our biggest weakness, I think, is the county and state portions of our tax revenue, particularly the tax revenue around public safety. The public safety tax for the courthouse, that portion is paying for half of our justice center. So that's I think our biggest exposure area right now.
Correct, we're expecting a shortfall in the public safety sales tax that will go into bond and interest fund. Fortunately, bond and interest fund does have a fund balance that can help accommodate that shortfall. County sales tax also goes to special highway, then also goes to general fund.
Sure, absolutely.
Matt, what is the dollar amount of that shortfall you alluded to, or do you know?
We know we originally had estimates developed in 2018 for the 2020 budget. We were expecting about $291,000 in total revenue for transient guest tax. We received 2 quarterly distributions. One just actually happened today. So we've received half our distributions for 2020, and we're at $101,000.
So we're about half.
Correct, and we expect
Prior
the next.
to the COVID.
That's prior to COVID,
Right.
where we know that one of the hotels that I've been discussing and talking to has been just absolutely decimated. They've shut down their top 4 floors, basically just having people on the first floor, because they haven't needed those other floors. So.
And we've made some budget adjustments, and council has too, with the chamber's budget for this year. We've made some other ones in that fund. And we think we'll be okay based on current projections, and we are dipping into the small fund balance they have. We're basically spending that down. But then moving forward, we expect things to normalize.
So, caveat, or jumping on the back of that, we think it'll get better and we are dipping in, but how long is that? Did you project that we would have the downturn with COVID? Like, if it extends out further, how far is that window that's anticipated for you right now?
Okay, just to be clear, we only had like a $20,000, $30,000 fund balance, so it wasn't very much in there in the first place. We're planning to probably dip into that and use most of it this year. COVID-19, I mean, it's really hard to project what the impact's really going to be. We're predicting very kind of significant. Like I mentioned, we have $100,000 in revenue so far. I wouldn't anticipate more than 120, 135 by the end of the year. We were lowering our projections for 2021 and 2022, kind of based on what would it be like if it goes based like on our first and second quarter of this year. So we are lowering them quite a bit to what we had in the past for projections, but we're just gonna have to keep monitoring it and see what the actual impact of COVID-19 is.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, well, good work keeping your finger on the pulse of our budget cash flow. We've got to thread a needle here as well. So.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll take sounds like everybody's kind of been supportive of the current funding plan, so we'll build those into the budget. I'll be back next meeting to discuss the budget in more detail.
Great, thank you. All right, now it's time for public comments. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to make comments about city matters or items on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. We only ask that if you come forward, you please adhere to the time limit. There's a 5-minute time clock on the left-hand side as you're facing the dais. No profanity, no personal attacks. With that being said, please come forward, state your name and address for the record if you wish to speak. Seeing no one coming forward, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there any member of the council wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second. Motion Melton, second Winters, that we approve the consent agenda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, any abstentions? Consent agenda passes. Moving on to the planning and zoning consent agenda. There is nothing there. Committee recommendation, item number 1, consider adopting an ordinance approving amendments to the cover and chapters 1, 3, 4, 5, 9, 10, and 11 of the City of Gardner Comprehensive Plan and adopting the Gardner Destination Downtown Placemaking and Mobility Enhancement Project Plan. Larry Powell, you can put a bow on this, right?
No.
No, you're not putting a bow on this.
We're going to make very short and sweet, though. How's that?
Okay.
The Planning Commission adopted the resolution PC-20-01 to amend the following portions of the City of Gardner Comprehensive Plan. The cover page, Chapter 1, Introduction, Chapter 3, Public Participation, Chapter 4, Vision, Goals, and Objectives, Chapter 5, Land Use and Development, Chapter 9, Image and Identity, and Chapter 10, Sustainability Framework, and Chapter 11, Implementation and Adopt and Incorporating by reference the Gardner Destination Downtown, a Placemaking and Mobility Enhanced Project Plan, and recommends the governing body approve the amendments of the City of Gardner Comprehensive Plan and adopt and incorporate by reference the Gardner Destination Downtown, a Placemaking and Mobility Enhancement Project Plan. And you have the suggested motion and ordinance in front of you.
Great. Thank you. Any public comment on committee recommendation item number 1? Seeing no one coming forward, any questions for Larry or the rep or staff? And obviously our person from Confluence is also here to take any questions as well. All right, with no one coming forward, no questions.
I'd like to ask something.
Oh.
I'm hearing all these great,
You have to,
I'm hearing all these
Yes,
great.
please name and address for the record.
Pamela Harkins, and I live at 129 North Sycamore Street, of course here in Great Gardner. I'm didn't come here for this tonight, but I've been sitting here listening, and Gardner needs to get beautiful, as you all say, get all these beautiful things here. But what worries me so much, I've been here since '95, 4,800 people when I came here. Love the country setting. I've watched Overland Park. I've watched these city people come here because they wanted out of the city. They wanted into country setting. But what I'm hearing is we're trying to become like Overland Park. We're trying to become like Shawnee. I don't want to lose our country setting, because when this town gets like Overland Park and Shawnee, guess what? We're going to keep moving and keep moving for more country, more country, more country. So I'm agreeing that we need some improvements, but I just don't want to lose our country feeling. So that's all I wanted to say. So
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that input. Anybody else? All right. Let me speak on that just now, the public comment. We appreciate your public comment. Thank you. One of the things that we tried to do, both with the comprehensive plan as well as this downtown plan, was to try to enhance the community character and not try to replace it. Is that correct, Larry? I mean,
This is correct, sir. So actually, what we're hoping for is to be following exactly what the lady has recommended to us, which is to take those good things of the city that we currently have, and for the things that the people have appreciated, which is the open space, the visibility, the quality of the community itself, and enhance upon those things, trying to get the local businesses to grow and expand and continue to provide those product lines and services that are currently in the community and that the public has tended to say that they would like to see more of. So hopefully we can follow along the very line that she's talked about, which is to enhance the things that people like and enjoy about the community. We don't necessarily want to be like our big neighbors to the north or to the east or to the west or the south. We do want to be what we are, which is a nice community. But the fact is we are growing, and we do have a request for additional services, be those quality of life services, medical, or be they retail. And so we're trying to find places to kind of shoehorn those into the existing community, taking those spaces that we have and doing that. And in the meantime, what we have to do, like Terry suggested, is look at the open, empty spaces that we do have in the community and realize maybe they could be better suited to something that would continue to enhance our community and make it better for the future. So I would encourage continued participation by the public.
Yes.
We will continue to have more meetings. Please come to them, look for them on the website. We look for continued involvement from the community in these things, and just the passage and the adoption of this is just setting in motion the overall broad plan concept of where we see we are currently and how we expect to get down the road for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So there are some things that we'll be doing that are short-term and some that are long-term. And the main thing that we're looking at right now is how can we improve the walkability of our community? How can we improve the accessibility of our community, bike paths? How do we make the bridge better that goes across the railroad tracks for pedestrians because it's really too narrow? Those are the kinds of things that we're looking at right now. And as a matter of fact, that is our next project. It's slated for 2021. Would be a pedestrian improvement to the bridge that goes over the railroad pass on Center Street. To widen that, narrowing the traffic pattern just a little bit, slowing people down a little bit, and improving the pedestrian and walkability of that particular area. So we hope that we're fitting right along those guidelines that she just mentioned.
Well, with all due respect to our neighbors to the north and east, I don't want us to be like that. I just don't. I think Gardner is who we are because we are Gardner. I mean, that's our character. That's who we've always been. And I don't think we want to emulate. We want to be better. We want to be able to learn from people's mistakes to our north and east, as they have made some. And it says, all due respect. I mean, we're not saying they're bad communities. I'm just saying they're not us, and we need to stay us. So. As long as this council is seated here, I think that we'll see that we're going to be very cognizant of that.
I wasn't saying there was anything wrong.
Oh, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
I lived there before I moved here.
Yeah.
He does this all the time, don't worry.
Oh, stop.
It's true.
Tori, you've been in this community pretty much all your life, right? I mean, you are close to it.
No.
No? I thought you had. 'Cause you-
Oh, man.
I've been here 16 years.
Yeah, just,
16
yeah.
16 years. But I'm very,
I'm
very young.
very young. Okay.
Oh, man, Todd.
All right.
No, but it is a great community. That's why I moved here.
And you've always said that you've wanted to keep the character
Yes,
of this community. And that's one of the
definitely.
reasons why you were on the planning commission and why
That's
you've
correct.
been so involved in the community.
Okay, it's late.
Hey, wait.
Right, I'm just saying.
I
Still got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I would agree, Mayor. What brought me here is the small town charm, and I think we should embrace that, and I think everybody agrees. But I think we do need to incorporate some of these new ideas, and we'll get where we want to get. But
That's
we're
exactly
very
right.
unique, and it's a great place to live.
Absolutely. All right, well, thanks. All right. Any further discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion on ordinance 2661. Motion, Gregorczyk, second, Melton. That we adopt ordinance number 2661, an ordinance adopting amendments to the comprehensive plan of the city of Gardner, Kansas, amending the cover page, chapter 1 introduction, chapter 3 public participation, chapter 4 vision, goals and objectives, chapter 5 land use and development, chapter 9 image and identity, chapter 10 sustainability framework, and chapter 11 implementation, and incorporating by reference the Gardner Destination Downtown a placemaking and mobility enhancement project plan. City clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Gregorczyk?
Yes.
Councilmember Melton?
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Councilmember Winters?
Yes.
Councilmember Baldwin?
Yes.
Right, ordinance number 2661 passes. No old business. New business, item number 1, consider adopting an ordinance authorizing the issuance and delivery of 27,450,000, that's the correct number, right? $450,000 principal amount of general obligation bonds series 2020A. The City of Gardner, Kansas, providing for the levy and collection of an annual tax for the purpose of paying the principal of and interest on the bonds as they become due. Matt Wolf. I miss Bruce Kimmel. He's usually the one giving us the amazing news.
I believe we have him on the line.
Yes,
So.
yes.
At the April 6, 2020 meeting, the governing body approved resolution number 2051, authorizing the offer for sale of Series 2020A general obligation bonds. The purpose of these bonds is to fund the water treatment expansion project and also the smart meters project. It's staff's recommendation that we adopt an ordinance authorizing the issuance and delivery of the 2020A general obligation bonds. We have Bruce Kimmel on the line, and he has a presentation for you.
Okay. Wish your smiling face, Bruce, but
I'm here, Mr. Mayor.
all right.
Good evening. Hi, Mayor and Council. Bruce Kimmel Teller. It's nice to be with you. I wish I could be there in person someday soon, hopefully. I'm here though to continue my win streak there. We'll see how long this can go, but we'll keep rolling as long as we can with these wonderful, really excellent bond sale results that we are able to help deliver for the city today. So we took bids on the city's behalf at 10 o'clock this morning, 11 o'clock. Are you getting feedback or is that just on my phone?
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. If I get garbled, let me know and I'll move to a different part of my house. But we took bids at 11 o'clock this morning and got 6 bids on your behalf. An underwriting firm called the Baker Group out of Oklahoma City was the winning bid, with a true interest cost of 2.34%. We had estimated a rate of about 2.77%, so this is about, roughly, 2.57%, so about 23 basis points better. And that equates to about $800,000 total reduction of debt service over the 20-year life of the bond. So when you're talking about, a $27 million bond issue, a lower interest rate really makes a huge difference over the 20 years of debt service. I won't go through all of the details, but I did want to hit a couple of high points. And let's move on to the next page of the sales report. You can see on the bid tabulation the winning bid from the Baker Group. What's interesting, you've seen this before, but you'll notice that the interest rates or the coupons on the bonds range right around 3.5% and then jump around in the 3 and the 2% range. But the yields on the bonds are what really matters, and that ranges from just over 1% to 2.7%. So you'll recall that's what we call a premium bid structure, where they want higher coupons than the actual yield. And that's what generated the ability to reduce the bond amount by $1.7 million from just over $29 million to about $27.4 million. So just wanted to clarify that. And again, the true interest rate on the bond issue was 2.34%. What's also interesting is the Baker Group was quite a bit out in front of the pack. The other bids weren't bad, but there was more spread than we normally see. And I think this is part of the pandemic situation that we have, where you have some underwriting firms that have very motivated customers, investors that desperately want muni bonds, and others that are maybe hoping to get lucky with a higher bid. And so, the first couple of bids were right on the money. The last 3 bids weren't so much. But it's just, that's why we do these competitive bond sales, putting it out to a national marketplace so that we can get those bids that truly are advantageous for the city. We'll go into a whole lot of detail on the debt sale or the debt schedules that follow. The amount of proceeds going to each of the 3 projects that Mr. Wolf mentioned are the same as originally projected. And again, total debt service is about $800,000 less than what we had estimated. And then finally, Mayor and Council, I wanted to touch on the Standard & Poor's rating report. As always, Mr. Wolf and Ms. Tornaden do a wonderful job of preparing, really in the upper echelon of all the clients that I work with in terms of their preparation for the rating presentation. presentation and discussion in terms of providing material to the analysts, and that without fail makes the process go really smoothly. The analysts typically have follow-up questions, but don't have to ask a lot of questions because they already have the information in front of them. And so that all went very smoothly. S&P did affirm the city's AA- rating with a stable outlook. And I would note that, as they always do, Mr. Wilson, Ms. Fernanda telegraphed the next several projects that the city has on its plate, including the proposed wastewater treatment plant. So none of the future infrastructure plans or financing plans are a surprise, and they're all really already baked into the city's AA- rating. So that all was great, and I won't go through all the details, but as we've discussed before, the main characteristics that matter the most are the city's strong economy, the city's strong financial management, and the city's very strong budgetary flexibility. Those are the criteria that drive the rating the most. And while the other ones matter and are definitely something that we monitor with city staff, there were really no red flags or even yellow flags as far as S&P was concerned. In fact, we talked quite a bit about the pandemic and the adjustments that the city has already made to its budget and the further changes that you are prepared to make if you need to in a recognition of revenue volatility. And they seem very satisfied with the work that the city has done and is doing. So kudos to all of you on that. So why don't I stop there? Hopefully that was what you were looking for in terms of level of detail, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bruce. Excellent job as always. We're always very pleasantly surprised when you come in with those sale numbers. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mary. And I should also mention, as you consider the ordinance and resolution in front of you, Bond Counsel Ellsworth from Tech Rock, I believe, is on the line as well. And he can answer questions that you might have about the legal documentation.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Open up the floor for public comments on new business item number 1. All right, seeing none, any questions for Bruce or Matt? Yes, Randy.
Mayor, I had just maybe one clarification, less a question. Bruce, on page 6 of the handout that council got, under very weak debt and contingent liability profile,
Yes.
I'm going to read the 2 lines and then ask my question or clarify if maybe it's a typo. Total government fund debt service is 27% of total governmental fund expenditures, and net direct debt is 441% of total governmental fund revenue. Is that 441% correct?
It is. Councilmember Grorczyk, is that you that I'm speaking to?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I wasn't 100% sure. That's one of the metrics that S&P always puts in its reports, and I'm not entirely sure why, and I've never gotten a good answer on it. They literally just add up all of your debt and divide it by your total governmental revenues. But in terms of whether it's actually meaningful, because you're paying off debt over 10, 15, in some cases 20 years, and they're measuring it against a single year's worth of revenue. The whole reason you issue debt, right, is that you can spread the cost equitably against current and future taxpayers and ratepayers. So it is what it is. I'm never really sure what to do with it, but that isn't a typo. That is a correct number.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. I just got it, just before the meeting, and just
going
through it quickly, it just stood out to me and thought I'd ask.
Yeah, and I would just mention also, to the extent any of you have follow-up questions, Mr. Wolf and I would be, we can share more detail on their methodology and some of the numbers they use. And so if there are questions, please let me know.
Will do. Thank you so much.
And we are a growing city, so that has something to do with the level of indebtedness relative to our fund.
Yeah, and Mayor, I guess one other thing on that, we've talked about how they use certain descriptors in a uniform way, and very weak certainly sounds bad, but they fully understand these infrastructure needs. They understand that a lot of your debt is paid from electric and water and sewer utility revenues and not property taxes.
Mhm.
And so even though they use these somewhat pejorative terms, they're actually not alarmed by your debt service obligations. And actually, debt only makes up 10% of your credit profile or credit characteristics. So, you know, it's important to keep a lid on and to keep track of, but it's not like it's a crippling factor in any way.
Yeah, Bruce, I appreciate your explanation. I'm not worried after understanding your explanation. That was a big number that stood out to me, so
Sure.
thank you for that.
Understandable. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'm gonna entertain a motion on ordinance number 2662.
So moved.
Second. Motion Melton, second Baldwin, that we adopt ordinance number 2662, an ordinance authorizing the issuance and delivery of $27,450,000 principal amount of general obligation bond series 2020A of the city of Gardner, Kansas, and providing for the levy and collection of an annual tax for the purpose of paying the principal of and interest on the bonds as they become due. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Melton.
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
Councilmember Winters.
Yes.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes.
Councilmember Gregorczyk.
Yes.
Ordinance 2662 passes. New business item number 2. Consider adopting resolution prescribing the form and detail of and authorizing the delivery of $27,450,000 principal amount of general obligation bonds series 2028 of the city of Gardner, Kansas, previously authorized by an ordinance of the city. Matt?
Following the passing of the ordinance authorizing issuance and delivery of the bonds, this resolution is a second step to complete the transactions for the sale of the bonds. The attached resolution authorizes all preparations to facilitate the sale and issuance of the bonds. Staff recommends adopting the resolution.
I think we have to as part of this process. The housekeeping item, as Laura would call it. And Tyler's on if you have any questions, council. Any public comment on new business item number 2? Seeing none, any questions for Tyler or Matt? Anyone? I'll move right on to entertaining a motion on new business item number 2.
Second.
Motion Gregorczyk, second Melton. We adopt resolution number 2053, a resolution prescribing the form and details of and authorizing the delivery of $27,450,000 principal amount of general obligation bonds series 2028 of the city of Gardner, Kansas, previously authorized by an ordinance of the city. City Clerk.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
Councilmember Winters.
Yes.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes.
Councilmember Gregorczyk.
Yes.
Councilmember Melton.
Yes.
Resolution 2053 passes. New business item number 3. Consider adopting an ordinance authorizing the city of Gardner, Kansas to issue its industrial revenue bonds taxable under federal law, Series 2020 Main Street Marketplace, in the principal amount of not to exceed $9,500,000 for the purpose of financing the acquisition, construction, and equipping of a commercial facility and authorizing the execution of certain documents in connection with the issuance of the bonds. Matt?
At the February 18th, 2019 meeting, Council adopted resolution number 2010 stating the city's intent to issue future IRBs in the principal amount of approximately $19,390,000 for the Main Street Marketplace project, commonly referred to as the Price Dropper project, to finance a portion of the cost of acquiring, constructing, equipping an approximately 60,000 square foot grocery store and redevelopment of an existing grocery store and development of 2 pad sites. The developer of the project has indicated that the construction of the new grocery store is nearly complete, but redevelopment of the existing grocery store will be deferred. The developer has requested that one series of IRBs in an amount not to exceed $9.5 million be issued now to finance a portion of the cost of the new store when redevelopment of the existing grocery store moves forward. Council will be asked to consider a resolution of intent to issue a second series of IRBs to finance that portion of the project. Please note that this is conduit debt. The bond shall not be a general obligation of the city, nor constitute a pledge of full faith and credit of the city, and shall not be payable in any manner by taxation. Staff recommends adopting the ordinance.
And bond counsel Ellsworth is on the line if we have questions on the IRB issuance. A public comment on new business item number 3. Seeing none, any questions for Tyler or for Matt? Anyone? I did happen to have one question, and that was having to do with the redevelopment. What I I know that we're not having the IRB issuance for the redevelopment at this time. But that's part of their budget amount through the, through the project plan, correct? So is there gonna be any other activity that we have to undertake other than a second ordinance for the IRB?
Tyler, correct me if I'm wrong, but no, I don't believe there is. I mean, there is the CID that they delayed, that will be coming back.
Correct.
But regarding the IRBs, we'll just have to pass another ordinance when they have that second series come by.
Okay, thank you.
That's correct, Matt. This is Tyler. It would be a second bond ordinance.
Thank you, Tyler. All right, no other questions. I'll entertain a motion on ordinance 2663.
So moved. Second.
Motion from Melton, second Gregorczyk, that we adopt ordinance number 2663, an ordinance authorizing the city of Gardner, Kansas to issue its industrial revenue bonds taxable under federal law, series 2020 for the Main Street Marketplace project, and the principal amount not to exceed $9,500,000 for the purpose of financing a portion of the cost of the acquisition, construction, and equipping of a commercial facility, and authorizing the execution of certain documents in connection with the issuance of the bonds. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Winters?
Yes.
Councilmember Baldwin?
Yes.
Councilmember Gregorczyk?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Melton?
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Ordinance 2663 passes. Thank you very much, Matt Wolf and Tyler and Bruce. All right, new business item number 4. Consider adopting a resolution authorizing the adoption and execution of an amended and restated benefit plan. Alan
Thank you.
Rambis.
Thank you. And this also is a housekeeping item, but with your permission, I'd like to just cover one other thing very quickly. This past week, we had our open enrollment to our insurances that go into effect July 1st. And just want to let you know that the high deductible plan in the health insurance still received 87% of the enrollments. Currently, there are 88%, so it's almost identical. And the PPOs, of course, then had 13%. So it's almost identical to what we have now. Dental enrollment, we had 118 employees enroll, and vision, 130 employees enroll. So I think it was a very successful enrollment process.
Great.
So on new business item number 4, at the March 16th, 2020 City Council meeting, items authorizing the adoption of health insurance plans from Humana and adopting a resolution authorizing the City of Gardner to withdraw participation from NPR were presented and approved. As part of the transition away from NPR, the city will also need to obtain the services of a provider for the flexible spending account, or FSA services, as part of the city's benefits administration. City staff, in conjunction with CBIZ, determined that Flex Made Easy, which is the name of the company, provided the best options and price for this service, as unlike many other FSAs, their service is not tied to a particular health insurance provider and can be continued regardless of any insurance provider changes in the future. Flex Made Easy requires that the governing body pass a resolution authorizing staff to execute and implement the administration of these FSA services referred to within the resolution and plan documents as a welfare benefit plan. Please note that this is the name of the plan only and is not to be confused with any state or federal social programs.
Thank you for that.
Okay. I knew you would appreciate it.
Knew where my question was going, right?
So the staff recommends that we adopt Resolution 2054, a resolution authorizing the adoption and execution of an amended and restated welfare benefit plan of the City of Gardner, Kansas.
Thank you very much,
Okay.
Alan. Any public comments on new business item number 4? All right. Any questions for Alan?
Alan, will this be a year-over-year function, or will this give us some longevity as well as consistency?
Should give us longevity.
Okay.
Yep.
nice things about this, but every time we're gonna be reassessing the benefits plans, and we can stay with this because
Exactly.
we go to the Blue Cross one year.
Right.
And it's still not gonna affect us. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Trying to move this along.
Look at you go.
You got that right.
You haven't
All
done
right.
it yet, though.
Entertain a
Still
motion
waiting.
on new business item number 4.
Second.
Motion Gregorczyk, second Melton, that we adopt resolution number 2054, a resolution authorizing the adoption and execution of an amended and restated welfare benefit plan for the city of Gardner, Kansas. City clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes.
Councilmember Gregorczyk.
Yes.
Councilmember Melton.
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
Councilmember Winters.
Yes. Resolution 2054 passes. Thank you very much for your work on that, Alan. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, let's move on to council updates. Does staff have anything from council? I'm going to start with our city attorney, who's sitting in a completely different area of the room. Ryan Dank.
Nothing from me tonight.
Question about these orders from the health director, the health officer of the county. Could you please give us a quick little update on that, and what we can expect during this time?
Well, so the county health officer came out on Friday, extended the stay-at-home through May the 11th, I believe is the date. The county also took up at that time in the Board of County Commissioners meeting their proposal. Well, so there's two statutory provisions by which there's one statutory provision by which the county health officer has authority to issue emergency directives. Then there's the emergency management statute, which is different statutory authority. That's the statutory authority by which the county was entertaining implementing its phased back to work plan. They, in essence, got to the end of that process, and contemporaneous therewith, the governor issued her ad astra plan for the return to work. Very, very similar in that it looked at 4 different stages in both plans, and identified different measures to be taken in each phase. So there's quite a bit of detail in the plan. If you have any specific questions on any of that, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Yeah, the main question, to be honest, is there's some confusion about what's going to happen once the back to work order, if it expires from the health officer, that where in the process is Johnson going to get a gate into? Are they going to gate? Is Johnson going to get a gate into that process on the 11th in week 1 or week 2 of phase 1? That's the biggest one, because people don't want to know that they're going to be waiting another week to get into phase 2.
I actually had that conversation today.
Okay.
And if the county order expires, then we will automatically go into the state order, and it would be like we'd already been there for a week. So
Okay.
the governor will dictate when we move to the next phase, and there won't be a delay for Johnson
That's
County.
great to
We'll
hear.
gate right into it.
That's great to hear.
So, but then, at any time in this process, the public health director from the county could jump back in.
Yeah.
He could extend his order, or he could jump in at any other time.
All right. Okay, well, thank you, appreciate that. Parks and Rec, Jason Bruce.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, do you have an update for us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Just wanted to give everyone an update. We sent out a notification today to all of our patrons. That let them know we're still here. We continue to not take any registrations or reservations, any memberships at this time. We're getting lots of questions, obviously, about the aquatic center. We still are in touch with local and national organizations to determine what that pool season will look like. At the meeting, a Zoom meeting on Wednesday with our local agencies, with our baseball league, softball league, t-ball, those kinds of programs, to discuss what that's going to look like. and then on Friday have a metro area directors meeting to discuss pool. That'll be the big topic. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Jason, appreciate it. Gons Garcia, utilities, anything going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, with the Hillsdale expansion, he's moving really good with no delays. With the last two landowners signing the easement agreement, we will start installing the raw water line in the next couple of weeks. So we're in good shape. That's what it is for now.
I think he's,
Okay,
that's all I got. for now.
thank you very much, Gons. Yeah, you broke up a little bit at the end there, thank you. Michael Kramer, Public Works, are you on?
He's on, he didn't have anything.
Oh, there's nothing there? Okay, great. Chief Belcher.
From his hole in the wall.
The disembodied voice from the next room says there's nothing. Okay. Matt Wolf.
I thought we heard from him already.
A few times, yeah.
I just want to let you know, like, finance is kind of in its crunch time right now. We have the audit going on, developing the CAFR, developing the budget book, and also a debt sale going on. But we're going to kick off with our first really major budget meeting at the next meeting, and it'll be, pretty rapid process getting ready for the budget to be approved in August.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matt. We know you're working hard over there.
I was gonna say, great job on
Absolutely.
everything with the whole department.
Thank you all.
It shows well.
Larry Powell, Economic Development and Business, and you are busy as well.
It's continuing to be busy, which is very fortunate for our community. So our inspectors are continuing to be very much seen in the field. We're also having a very busy planning commission timeframe right now. So we've got 2 or 3 projects that'll be on the end of this month's agenda, which concern final plats for new subdivision housings, developments that are occurring. And we've had some interesting meetings with some folks concerning hopefully some future commercial development. So we'll see how those go down the road. It's not been very quiet about QT's new facility, but I would say we do have the application in hand now, and that we'll be going to the final plats process for this month's meeting, which will be a nice project for the end of Gardner Road across from the new medical facility. We also will be expecting an administrative plat for the medical facility because they have a need for additional parking. As they've been open, they find that the turnover is such that people are coming in and the time frames they need for people coming and going, the amount of parking that is standard for the size building they have is inadequate. So we'll be working with them to build some additional parking to the east of their existing parking lot. As well as some signage that they're getting ready to put up along I-35. So those are going on. You may have noticed that they're finally getting some road work done on the intermediate road next to Price Chopper between Walgreens and QT downtown, and that it's very soft dirt, and they've had to put a lot of work into it to prep the ground to get it ready to pave, and hopefully if the rain will hold off, that'll get done in the next day or so, or 3 or 4 or whatever, but we'll see what happens with that. Same thing with the parking lot in front of Price Chopper. That's pretty much ready to go now at the present time. Car wash is also moving forward quite quickly now. So that project we're hoping will be open within 15 to 20 days, we hope. If again, it's paving, depending on when that does. But most of the equipment's in place and most of the project's ready to roll. Warren Place is also moving forward at this point in time. Excuse me, they have some outside sidewalks and so forth to be putting in place, but the majority of the project is pretty much completed. And that will be a nice addition to our community for event centers when we can get back into the event center and entertainment business, which we're moving forward on and that's a nice private development that's been worked on very hard by the owner, and they've spent numerous hours trying to make sure they have a quality project, and I know the community will be happy to have that available to them for future parties and events and weddings and ceremonies and all those wonderful things we want to get back to. So that's it for right now.
a lot.
Thanks,
City,
Larry.
yes, absolutely. City clerk,
Nothing for me.
you and city
You're not
administrator.
gonna forget him?
I'm not gonna forget it,
I thought I
Rich.
had 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So staff continues to put together a communication plan to try to, not end the confusion, but to give people as much certainty as possible on where we're going. We are planning on Monday, following the governor's plan. I met with Jason Camus today, and we talked about some of the personal protective equipment. We set up a system on how we're gonna make that available to businesses. Once we get the masks in, hopefully Wednesday or Thursday, we'll probably start distributing those on Friday and Saturday, so people are ready. The confusion is not, I can tell you, it's not limited to Gardner. There's competing interest at the county and state level that, I mean, we sit there and watch the press conferences and learn things when everybody else does. So we're trying to be as prepared as possible to help businesses get open and get them the information they need, but it's been difficult, but we're trying to get a handle on it now.
So what we've done, just for those folks who don't know that we've done much planning, is that we have procured a significant amount of bulk masks, disinfecting equipment, gloves. Gardner Edgerton Chamber of Commerce has procured some other products, hand sanitizer, and we have basically used the bulk purchasing power of the city of Gardner to be able to offer those to small businesses at our cost. And so, as we get more information on this out to the community, that's our way of being able to assist those small businesses that don't have the big purchasing power of larger companies to get those kind of items. We know that it's been difficult to get those items on the market, so.
And I can tell you the county is doing that for countywide, and individual cities are finding that it's difficult to procure those items now, so.
We got ahead of the curve on that one because we started our preparations earlier. So, on the other side of that, there is a plan coming together for testing, some limited community testing. We're not going to test 24,000 people. We're going to have a directional sample that's going to be then utilized by the county for decision-making purposes there. And we're working through that with our health partners as well as with labs in the area. So. That's where we stand on the testing piece, and I wanted to make sure people knew that was where we were going on that.
Right, one of the questions about the testing was who is paying for the tests, and it's important to note that Gardner is not going out of pocket for the test. It's gonna be billed through insurance, and that's one of the reasons why we have a healthcare provider that we're partnering with, so.
Correct. Yeah. So, and 80% of the tests will be covered by insurance.
Right.
The rest could be through foundation or through the government health supplements that we're getting through COVID assistance. So, any other questions any other stuff for us to? Okay, great. All right. Well, then I will start with council updates for staff. I will start with Tori Roberts.
Oh, wow, I get to start first.
Yes.
I think it's good that we're getting prepared so we can open up the community. I think that's important. But one thing is we just have to make sure we're safe and we look out for all the citizens. And I know there was some confusion last time about we're opening the city and we don't care what rules. And I don't think that's what we meant, but I think it got confused and construed. I do think that we're doing a great job planning for opening up, and we just need to be cautious and make sure we're following everything, which I think we are. So thank you for doing your due diligence and getting us on track and ready to open up. And I think we're in the right stages.
I want to make it crystal clear. I don't think anybody on this dais and anybody sitting behind these mics, especially our staff, ever intended on going rogue in Johnson County. I think that there was you
may be, and I didn't think we did when we left.
It was
but
construed
I know
that way by certain parties.
It got confused, but I just wanted to kind of.
Yes.
I thank everybody from staff and everybody behind the scenes because I think we're doing it right. I think it just got just got kind of out of hand a little bit. But thank you for everybody working hard on this.
Absolutely. Mark Baldwin.
I'm just gonna mention that I love the idea of the city basically partnering with the businesses where we use our ability to help them but we're not paying for it.
Exactly.
I think that's a great partnership there, and I think we should utilize that mentality on anything we can. So that's it for me.
Wow, that's weird.
I know,
Praise.
I know, I said something
Did
nice.
anybody else notice that?
Council President Winters.
Just curious, a lot of the stuff, the people calling in, they all sound a little cracked up. I don't know, is there any, not being a technical, person, is there anything we can do to improve that system? Because I'm assuming we're gonna have to be utilizing it more and more.
At some point.
Yes, so because we started using Zoom, Charles thinks that we had a conflict with our live stream, that it interfered with an IP address. So that may be responsible for the poor audio as well, so we'll get that fixed.
Okay. I've actually seen this audio though in past meetings as well as with the planning commission. I saw a lot of problems with audio, so this might just be part of that structure. Council Vice President.
How are we on our scheduling a meeting with Edgerton about the wastewater?
Gons, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yes, I have reached out to Beth Lynn and the Public Works Director to resume the meeting in a maybe a semi-annual basis and quarterly.
I don't
The
know.
last meeting we had was early 2019. I would classify the meeting as short, and the information provided to us was very limited.
I don't know, Gons.
Are you saying there are dates to meet or the calendar is limited or they want the discussion to be limited?
The discussion was very limited.
Okay.
In 2019.
In 2019, but what are we looking
We
at?
need to schedule one for.
Yeah. For this year.
I will, and I'll just waiting for a feedback from Beth or the Public Works Director.
I'll expect you to follow up and send us an email on what's going on there.
Absolutely.
I'd like to get something on the calendar. I'd like to get 4 meetings a year on the calendar right away, so we know for the next 20 years that we have
20
4
years?
meetings. Yes, because we own a wastewater plant, so no matter if I'm sitting here or somebody else, 4 meetings a year, the next 20 plus years, we know we're gonna have them.
Okay.
So, that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gorsuch.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I've got one item. Going back to the meeting 2 weeks ago at the end, I think that your heart was in the right place, and I think that the preparations that we've seen since then are good intentioned. I agree with Councilman Baldwin. But I think that we should have had a little more detail as to what we were supporting when we said that we supported your action. Again, I'm not throwing stones here. If anything, I probably should apologize to the citizens for not asking for more detail as to what we were nodding or agreeing to. Again, I think it's all good intentions. I think that the Facebook post got out of hand, which I'm not necessarily discussing, but that was a product of your request of all of us to look into this proactively. When I thought of proactively, I thought of a 3PL, a public-private partnership. I thought about PPE. I thought about reaching out to businesses to understand how we can help them.
Yep.
Because I'm only a politician and a citizen and a dad and a husband. I'm not a medical guy.
Yep.
The closest we have is Dr. Todd, but no,
I can do surgery right now on anybody.
Motel 6 doesn't count.
Field dressing doesn't count.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
But again, I say this in good faith, but moving forward in those situations, and I hope we don't have another situation like that. I think as an elected member, I need to ask for more details as to what you want us to support on.
Sure,
And I see some nodding heads.
And I think that what I had asked for was for consensus to start the preparation process. The preparation process was multiple pronged, and we did talk about gating criteria, or satisfying gating criteria for phase 1 per the CDC guidelines. That was what initiated the entire conversation there, was to go through that gating criteria. and make sure that we had all those prerequisites satisfied. And I got consensus from everybody around this table that we needed to start doing that. And the reason why is because if there was a going live on the 4th, because that's when the governor's order expired, we needed to be ready. If we weren't, we couldn't open. So
I
it was
understand.
prudent to do that.
I understand. I'm just saying, I think we should have asked for more details, or at least I see it that way, and I see some heads nodding yes, so, that's all I have though.
Okay,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that's fair.
Yeah.
All right. All right, well, I love this town. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion, Gregorczyk, second, Melton, that we adjourn. All those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, any abstentions? We are adjourned.
So I think there was some echo coming through here too, and then it magnified on.
I think there's some feedback going on.
Yeah.